Initiation by Elisabeth Haich, Chapter 34, The Four Faces of God. Again I stand before Ptahhotep. My child, he begins, today you'll learn what the four faces of God are. It will help you very, very much to recognize them in you. The four faces of God are in everything that has been created. All of creation, including yourself, has been built up on these four faces. Life in the visible world, beginning with the gigantic central suns of the world systems and running all the way down to the tiniest protozoa, is merely a rotation around the four faces and in the four faces of God. You know why we always represent divinity in its primordial state of resting within itself as an equilateral triangle. God, in his three aspects, is 1 in 3 and 3 in 1. But this condition, just like the equilateral triangle, carries within itself the possibility of the number 4, when the three aspects of the basic number 1 separate from each other, and this happens when they move from the unmanifested into the manifested state. The 1 and 3 becomes 1 and 3. In this way, the number 4 is born. Cast a glance at the equilateral triangle. In it, you see only one unit, which has 3 sides, 3 aspects, but it contains, hidden and unmanifested, the number 4. Because the equilateral triangle can be divided up into 4 smaller equilateral triangles. When the triangle moves out of the unmanifested into the manifested state in the three-dimensional world, a tetrahedron is formed. As you have already seen, the first primordial form of material manifestation, the cube, contains the tetrahedron hidden and unmanifested within itself. The 4 triangles which make up the faces of the tetrahedron are the areas of contact between the divine and the material, as they are identical with the inner areas of the truncated corners of the cube. When we turn the triangles of the tetrahedron outward with the help of the corners of the cube, thus manifesting the triangles of the tetrahedron, we produce the 4-sided shape of the pyramid, whose 4 sides at one and the same time are the 4 triangles of the tetrahedron turned outward and truncated corners of the cube turned outward. The 4 sides of the pyramid symbolize the 4 faces of God, each of which, taken alone and by itself, manifests the 3 aspects of the first source, the divinity at rest within itself, standing above all creation. The pyramid reveals a living reality, the living law in which God always and absolutely manifests himself in the material world, and because he does so, he is indwelling in everything that has been created. From every point of the universe, God manifests himself fourfold. In each of the 4 directions of the earth and sky, he radiates with a different effect. And because these streams of force, which originate at one point and yet are so very different, all come forth from the paradisical unity, we can speak of them figuratively as 4 great rivers springing up in the center of paradise, where the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil are rooted and flowing out into the external world in 4 different directions. You will find this 4-fold manifestation in everything that's been created, most notably in the 4 characteristics of the great currents of air, the winds. Even the dullest person knows that the winds coming from the 4 different directions, have completely different effects. The north wind is dry, cool, with a quieting and paralyzing effect. In many parts of the world, it makes water hard as stone. The south wind always brings heat and has an arousing, vitalizing effect. The east wind is a cool, refreshing wind. The west wind brings warmth and dampness, in many places rain. Its effect is fatiguing and soporific. This is something you already know. This fourfold effect is not only to be found in the major winds, but in everything that has been created. Look at the trees. The northern side, exposed to the radiation from the cool southern face of God, is always covered with moss. Have you ever wondered why the human being has only one face, and that is turned to the front, in the direction in which we are fiery and giving, whereas when we turn our back on something, we are cool towards it. Our limbs, too, are directed forward, and we can radiate our willpower only in the direction in which we are facing. And why do we sleep best when lying in a north-south direction? Why do all animals lie down this way? Why are even the birds' nests and the anthills built in a north-south direction? Animals have no intellect to understand the reason why, but they feel the effect of quieting radiations coming from the north and vitalizing currents from the south. Instinctively, they feel that it's best for the circulation of their own current life when they build their nests in a north to south direction, and when they sleep that way. That's the secret of why a person who is seeking connection with God and praying should face north or east, but never south or west. In the north and in the east, he can find sources that lead him towards spiritualization, whereas in the south and west, he finds stimulation which leads his consciousness to identify itself with his sensual instincts. Wherever members of the divine race went, they taught the sons of men this profound truth in various ways, depending on the characteristics of the people around them. Here, where people understand geometric forms and can grasp truth intellectually, we express the truth about the 4 faces of God in the form of the pyramid, but there are other races of people more inclined to grasp divine truth in spiritual experiences. The members of our race who fled to such countries have built gigantic figures of stone to represent divinity in the form of a human figure, sitting like a triangle and having a head with 4 faces, one looking in each direction. Both representations reveal the same fact. Whenever the divine creative principle leaves its timeless, spaceless condition, in the unmanifested state to come out of the 3-dimensional world and become matter, it manifests itself even while keeping its 3 aspects in the number 4. The shape of the pyramid shows this clearly, that in each of its 4 sides standing on the square base forms a triangle representing the 3 aspects of God. Thus, the pyramid manifests 4 times 3, the number 12. And that brings us to another truth. As you can see from this symbolic representation in the form of the pyramid, each of the 4 faces of God contains the 3 divine aspects. This results in a 12-fold manifestation, which is present at every point of the universe and is acting in everything that exists, beginning with the individual creatures living on the planets and running throughout the planets to the suns and the systems of suns throughout the universe, just like little circles and larger ones and larger circles and still larger ones and on to infinity. So, if you understand one of these circles, you will understand the inner structure of the entire universe and of every single creature in it, for the entire visible universe is based on this 12-fold manifestation of God. But before we go on, you must realize that everything we human beings can perceive with our organs of sense from our own personal view, that is from the outside, is the exact opposite of what exists in the divine state of being. Everything you can see when looking at it from the outside, whether from above or below, from front or back, from right or left, turns into exact opposite as soon as you stop looking at it and start being it. When you look at something, you're in a dualistic relation to it. You, the observer, and what you see are two different poles. But when you are something, you are in a monistic condition, in divine unity. To show you an example, let's take the letter E. In what direction does this letter run? It runs from left to right, Father, I answer. Good, says Ptahhotep. Now, when I draw the same letter on your breast so that you are the letter, you're in a condition of unity with it, in a state of being with it. In what direction is it running now? From right to left, Father, I answer. Yes, just the opposite. Come with me now and I'll show you something more. Ptahhotep leads me under two large circular plates that hang from the ceiling and serve as lamps. They both have the same 12 pictures running in opposite sequence, facing in opposite directions. On the first plate, the pictures all have the heads turned towards the center, while on the second, the heads are all towards the circumference, and the sequence from right to left is one on one is just the opposite sequence on the other. Ptahhotep leads me to the first circle and asks, when do you see the pictures in this circle right side up? Always, from any point along the side, Father. Then Ptahhotep leads me to the second circle and he asks, how do you see these pictures? All of them have their heads down, just the opposite of the pictures in the other circle, and they're in the opposite sequence, I answer. Now, try to find a spot from which you can see all these circles, all these pictures, right side up in the right sequence. I look at the figures, and as I want to see them right with their heads up, I involuntarily step over to a point precisely under and consequently precisely in the center of the disc. And all of a sudden, all the figures seem to change their positions. Now, they're all standing right side up and in the correct sequence. I turn around slowly, continuing to stand in the center. Each and every one of the figures is right side up. But when I move only a single step to the side, they're all the wrong way around again. I step back into the center. Consciously and deeply moved, I experience the state of being. I understand what it means. The excitement of the discovery makes me dizzy. Seeing how thrilled and how moved I am, Ptahhotep smiles. Do you understand now, he asks, why the personal is always the exact opposite of the divine? Do you understand why human script runs from left to right, while the divine runs from right to left? Yes, Father of my soul, I stammer, trembling with excitement. I do understand. Ptahhotep takes my hand in his. Oh, how quickly the mighty power of his blessed hand calms me and leads me to a large blackboard where I can see various geometric figures. The earth, he continues, receives the 12-fold radiation of force from the four faces of God, from the direction of the various constellations of stars. Taken together, these constellations surround us like a wheel. We call this huge wheel the zodiac. It's owing to the effect of the radiations of the zodiac that the earth can exist at all. Their vibrations met in a point in cosmic space causing an interference in the waves of energy and leading to condensation, materialization. Little by little, our Earth came into being through this process of materialization. And as the sun played a great role in this process, the Earth grew in the field of the force of the sun and became its satellite. It receives its life energy from the sun, but it's also constantly receiving radiations from the zodiac and from its sister planets of our solar system. The four faces of God, that is, the four cardinal points in the vault of stars in the divine condition of being, are each face of God, each cardinal point of the vault of heaven, contains within itself three aspects of the unmanifested divinity. So, the 12 signs of the zodiac came into being. The three fiery aspects of the first face of God, of the first group, are revealed in the constellations called Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. The lion is the first manifestation of God, and consequently the great father of the entire zodiac. That's why all three manifestations of the first face of God have a fatherly, life-giving character. The ram, Aries, radiates the fire of youth, the procreative power of the young father who penetrates the bosom of nature, awakens new life, and sets it in motion. The ram is the power of spring, which, in its effect, is just as wild and heedless as the ram itself. The lion is the fire of the perfectly developed, dignified, respectable man, the mature father who radiates his creative power, his love, his warmth towards all his children as he brings them up in affectionate care. The lion is the power of summer. The centaur, Sagittarius, is a being that has grown beyond its animal nature, overcome its physical desires, and aimed its consciousness towards the higher goal. The four faces of God in the divine state of being. Its radiation is the fire of the spirit, of the wise, mellow father who goes on helping his mature children with his spirituality, good thoughts, and sage advice. The centaur, or Sagittarius, is the spiritual fire of thought, the power of age, of winter. The three aspects of the second group of the earthly material face are Taurus, Virgo, and Capricornus, or the bull, the virgin, and the goat. So Taurus is the bull, Virgo is the virgin, and Capricornus is the goat. All three manifestations of this face of God reveal a motherly character. In the springtime, the bull stands in a green meadow, and all of nature is decked out in the beautiful clothing of a bride on her wedding day, ready to receive all the procreative power of her bridegroom. The radiation of the zodiac sign of the bull enables the earth to receive the fiery power of life and to take root. Thus, the divine seed is able to incarnate itself in an earthly body. The bull radiation makes it possible for the divine self, the creative principle, the logos, to become flesh. The bull awakens the power of conception in matter, in the female of the species, calling the bride to readiness. The bull represents that aspect of incipient maternity in which the mother-to-be is ready to conceive. The bull, the virgin, let me start that sentence over again. Virgo, the virgin, is the spotless queen of heaven, the mother goddess of nature, who has never been touched by a male and yet is pregnant with myriad creatures that are born from her divine body. The power of the sign of the Virgin is the fertility of nature, and that's why she's shown holding in her hand a spike of grain with 5 kernels. In the mystic world, the Virgin is the human soul, which, purged of all earthly dross, has become spotless and has received the divine seed from the Spirit of God. Thus, she is expecting the divine child in which both principles, the divine and the material, are blended into perfect unity. Thus, Virgo is the pregnant, expectant aspect of maternity. The third aspect of the earthly face of God is Capricorn, the goat. This animal lives in the region of the hardest matter of earth, stones, rocks, boulders. The centripetal force of the law of matter causes matter to reach the highest degree of hardness and consequently crystallize. In the crystal, matter overcomes itself, losing its original characteristic of opacity and becoming perfectly transparent. In the crystal, matter reveals the original geometric forms of the creative power. A child, too, is the solidified, crystallized form of the divine creative power of life. Through the law of matter, through the centripetal, compressive power of concentration, the achievement of the divine self, the divine child, consciousness, is born in the soul of man. As long as man identifies his consciousness with his animal instincts, he is like a stable in which the animals are living. In this stable, surrounded by animals, the divine child, the divine consciousness must be born. This takes place through the concentrating effect of the sign of Capricornus. The only path which can lead man back to unity, back into the lost paradise, is that of concentration. And that's why the birth of the divine child is celebrated in the month when the sun stands in the sign of the goat. The radiation of this center of force helps man fully to manifest and achieve the divine in and through matter in the body. Capricornus is the parturient aspect of the maternal. The three aspects of the third group, the vaporous face of God, are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, or the twins, the balance, and the water bearer. The vaporous combination state arising through this radiation gives movement, and that's why these three constellations are favorable for the manifestation of forces which require free and unhindered movement. They are spiritual in character. The sign of the twins carries within itself the two halves of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The radiated power of Gemini manifests itself as the urge to learn. The radiation of the Libra constellation forces everything into equilibrium. All the experiences man has collected are laid in the scales of the balance and weighed. It is the manifestation of law-giving knowledge. The constellation Aquarius radiates the knowledge that has been gathered under the sign of the twins, weighed in the balance, found worthwhile, and codified into laws. The water bearer passes on treasures to others, untiringly pours the water of life out of his vessel, letting its waves flow on to the remotest of worlds. The water bearer is the manifestation of the unhindered spirit, freed of all bonds. The three aspects of the fourth group, the aqueous face of God, are the crab, the eagle, the scorpion. Just a minute. The crab, the eagle, in brackets, scorpion, and fishes, or Cancer, so crab is Cancer, eagle or scorpion is Scorpio, fishes is Pisces. The three manifestations of this face of God have an emotional character which manifests itself in feelings. The zodiacal sign crab symbolizes the little water of the hole in which the crab lives. The radiated power of the zodiacal sign of the crab manifests itself as the introspective, self-analyzing consciousness of the truth-seeking individual. The sign of the scorpion-eagle represents the great turning point, when the crawling worm is transformed into a high-flying eagle, redeemed, a being that has awakened and become conscious in the divine self. The worm, scorpion, must kill itself in order to become an eagle, and that's why this constellation has a double name. In its unredeemed condition, it's called scorpion, after the animal that can kill itself with its own sting. In its redeemed condition, it's called the eagle, symbolizing the free soul flying high above the material world like the divine falcon, Horus. You see, the three aspects of each triangle are related. Starting on the material plane, they progress upward in the direction of spiritualization. But there's not only a relationship between the three aspects of each of the faces of God, but the four triangles are actually so related that their centers are identical. In this way, they make up the zodiacal circle of 12 revelations, much that the various aspects of the four triangles form an interrelated series of steps in development and progress. Then there is still a third relationship between the individual constellations, namely the one between the opposite constellations, each of which is a complementary half of the other. First, let us discuss the relationship of the steps in development. Excuse me. The series naturally begins with the constellations of the Ram, as the beginning of all expression of life, and hence the beginning of springtime lies in the Ram. The signs of the zodiac run in this sequence: Ram, Bull, Twins; Crab, Lion, Virgin, Balance; Scorpion, Eagle; Centaur, Goat, Water Bearer, Fishes. Everything that condenses into matter is manifested on the material plane and runs in its own lifetime through the full circle of the zodiac. The life of the individual human being is one great period that is divided into smaller periods: childhood, youth, maturity, senility, and these break down into still smaller periods: years, seasons, months, weeks, and lastly days. The individual signs of the zodiac have the following main characteristics. The Ram sees to it that something appears or is born in this world in the first place, and this is equally true when the actual time of birth doesn't fall under the sign of the Ram. That's because every birth, irrespective of the outside world, and of course irrespective of the various constellations, carries within itself the power of the beginning, and this power we call the Ram, both outside in the vault of the stars and inside each individual being. That's the absolute side of the Ram in every creative form. And the relationship is just the same with all the other constellations, with all manifestations of life, and with all the aspects of the four faces of God. There is always an inner, absolute manifestation and an outer, relative manifestation. After birth, every new creature must get its roots down wherever it is. This it does with the help of the bull. The new creature takes in food and assimilates it, gives it a material linking to the outer world, and creates a line of supply for its body. Under the influence of the signs of the twins, the new creature begins to gather experience, and his pathways begin to diverge, going into all kinds of ramifications like the branches of a tree. The creature develops in different directions and gains extensive knowledge. In the crab, it draws back into its home again to digest its spiritual gains. the experiences that it has gathered, its inner core begins to develop. Through life-giving fiery effect of the lion, the creature matures and gains dignity. It develops its powers and abilities and fulfills its earthly duty of begetting a new generation. It becomes father of a family. The virgin brings the harvest. Man brings the fruits of his labor into his barn. In the depths of his soul, the divine child, universal love, develops. In the balance, his deeds are weighed. The positive, the negative, credited and debited against each other. His attention is directed towards both sides. On the one hand, the worldly, on the other hand, the spiritual. Within himself, he brings these two worlds into perfect equilibrium, bringing into effect the inner divine law, which stands above and beyond everything that's relative. The sign of the scorpion brings the brings the solstice, the great turning point. Man must spiritualize the divine creative power which so far has manifested itself within him as a driving instinct and urge. He must now utilize this divine creative power in the service of others. This means he must completely overcome his person. He experiences the mystic death of this person, then resurrection and immortality in spirit. From now on, he ceases to serve materialism. High up above the earth, in perfect spiritual freedom, he flies like an eagle, like the sacred falcon Horus. Through the effect of the centaur, he becomes a great teacher, like the centaur himself. Excuse me. A being which has grown beyond the animal level, a being which now uses its animal body only in order the sooner to reach the great goal it clearly notices ahead. Its thoughts cut like lightning through the heavy cloud of darkness and ignorance. It passes its experience on to the next generation. In the sign of the goat, the divine child, universal love is born in the man's heart. It becomes identical with divine self and conscious in it. As the divine child that has always been born in his heart becomes visible, man becomes clear as a crystal. In his words and deeds, he reveals universal love. In the water bearer, the creature pours out and scatters its treasures. It has become the shining, resplendent child of God, standing above and beyond sexuality, radiating itself. It is the source of the highest divinely spiritual power. The process of transformation and dematerialization begins. In the sign of the fishes, the living creature experiences reunification with its hidden complementary half. This means, of course, that matter is disintegrated. The creature returns to its heavenly home, to universal unity, to God. Its consciousness glides over into cosmic consciousness. It casts off its body and it ends its earthly life. That's the path that every individual follows, even though he may not yet have reached the highest levels of consciousness. The steps of development may be different, but the circle of development is always the same. Now let's look at how the opposite signs of the zodiac supplement each other. The powerful, impulsive strength of the ram is regulated by the law of balance, which tames the ram's blind forces and guides them into the right channels. The bridal power of the sign of the bull supplements and satisfies the instinctive procreative urge of the scorpion. The maternal power of the crab, retiring to the shelter of its hearth and home, is the complementary other half of the crystallizing parturient radiation of the goat. The newly born child belongs to mother. The paternal radiation of the lion finds its other half in the childlike power of the water bearer. The father supports, protects, and educates the child. The youth in the sign of the twins, with its eagerness to learn, receives the knowledge he is thirsting for from the great teacher Centaur. The heavenly virgin, bearing the divine child in her holy womb, receives nourishment from the mystic world of the two fishes. Now you understand the radiations of the four faces of God and the varying effects of the different constellations. But in order to understand the life of the universe and the lives of the myriads of living creatures, including your own, you need to know that the circle of revelation, with its 12 centers of power, affects every point of the universe independently of the constellations. And because the four faces of God can never turn around, each constellation emits different radiations of power in the various directions of the sky. Thus, the radiation is determined by the everlasting, never-changing direction of the four faces. Let's take the constellation of the Lion, for example. In the direction of the south, it emits the radiation characteristic for the Lion, while towards the opposite side, to the north, it sends out the power of the water bearer. In a westerly fashion, that of the eagle; towards the east, that of the bull; in the northwesterly direction, that of the virgin; towards the west-northwest, that of the balance, and so on, in a different radiation in each direction. Now you understand that these radiations are not dependent on displays of the group of the stars, on this place of the group of the stars, but rather on the direction from which they come. Just like the wind has different effects depending only on the direction in which it blows, not on the place in which it starts. And now, here's another very important fact: because everything manifests itself outwardly from the center, and because the four faces of God radiate absolutely equally and unchangeably from every point, everything, whether it's a central sun, a planet, plant, animal, prozoic, or human being, is always the center of the two wheels, in the center of the great cosmic wheel. And since this center is identical with the center of the individual being concerned, also in the center of one's unmanifested being, one's own inner wheel, we receive the radiations of the great cosmic wheel from the outside, while those of our own wheel are emitted from the inside. We are identical with the situation of the earth, which has fallen out of the divine being. The earth is not the central spot in the universe, but rather a satellite of the sun, orbiting around the sun and rotating on its own axis. That's why we see everything in the universe as the exact opposite of what it is in reality. In the divine state of being, seen from the position of the earth, the whole vault of stars, with all its cosmic systems, solar systems, and planets, appears to rotate around us, but in reality the opposite is happening. It's not the vault of stars that's rotating around us, but rather our earth is orbiting around the sun, our sun, with our central solar system moving in a larger orbit around the cosmic sun, and the latter, with all its cosmic system, moving around the central sun, and so on in ever greater orbits and ever greater cosmic systems, on and on into infinity. And even the life of celestial bodies in cosmic systems is nothing other than the movement and development in the great cycles of the four faces of God in the zodiac. But just remember that every manifestation, every created form, regardless of where it is in the universe, carries within itself both the great cosmic wheel and its own little wheel, introspective of whether it's a protozoa, a plant, an animal, a human being, or celestial body, you'll consider this quite a matter of course when you understand that every point of the universe radiates the same 12-fold manifestation of the four faces of God, the radiations of energy which we receive from the great cosmic wheel come to us from the outside, and that's why we see the circle wrong side too, just like the mirrored reflection of the divine condition of being. Because the vault of stars, as seen from our standpoint on the earth, is always in motion, there is a corresponding change going on constantly in the composition of radiations reaching the earth from all the countless stars moving along their individual paths in the gigantic cosmic wheel. Every created form, including every human being, has its own individually composed structure of forces made up from the same creative forces that radiate from the stars of the universe. At the moment of birth, the structure of forces in the individual's own little zodiac wheel is identical with that of the forces in the great cosmic zodiacal wheel. And this leads us to something else that you should know, namely that a living creature can be born only when these two structures of forces coincide with each other completely. The position of the earth in the four faces of God, which can never turn around until the end of his life on this earth, man is constantly subjected to new impressions, new experiences, and all kinds of other influences. And as he gathers experience, his own inner constellation is modified to a great extent. Many forces are developed, many others get pushed into the background, depending on the individual's reactions to his deeds and his experiences. The inner constellation a creature has at the moment of its death is stamped indelibly upon its soul, and the latter cannot be reincarnated until the vault of stars in its constant movement comes into the same constellation. And this is why some people are reincarnated again after only a very short period of time, while others may even have to wait thousands of years until the stellar constellations match those that they carry in their souls. All the creatures that are born into the three-dimensional world, every moment throughout all eternity, ended their previous incarnation under the same constellation as the one which existed at the moment of their birth in this incarnation. The death constellation in one incarnation and the birth constellation in the next are always absolutely identical. On the other hand, the birth constellation and the death constellation for any incarnation are never identical, because the individual living creature concerned is changed through the experiences it has. But every creature, including man, carries within itself the imprint of the constellation reigning at the moment of its birth, and it carries this imprint through its entire life. This constellation contains the creature's own individual wheel, in which its subsequent development in character changes, are hidden. So, if you want to know the inner birth constellation of the forces that have built a living creature, you are working in its soul, in its body, in its entire being, and consequently also in its fate. You have to figure out the constellations the stars had at the moment of its birth. Because of the steady movement of the stars in the sky, the relationships within the two wheels, the cosmic and the individual, are constantly shifting. The centers of energy in the cosmic wheel, the constellations, the fixed stars, the planets, and the hidden centers of power of the individual wheel move away from the identical patterns that they had at the moment of birth. After a time, these patterns of power within these two wheels can approach each other again. And that's why the life of each individual, that's why in the life of each individual there are favorable and harmonious relationships at certain times and unfavorable, disharmonious relationships at other times. As a result, the creature's concerns sometimes reveal harmonious, positive characteristics and disharmonious, negative characteristics at other times, and because fate is the mirrored reflection of character and the result of the individual's needs, its life takes favorable turns sometimes and unfavorable ones at others. All forms of life are subject to these forces, and only one creature has the possibility of ruling over all these energies and forces at work throughout the universe within its own being and within its own destiny. This creature, which has the ability to control these forces at will, is man. But he can control them only when he is conscious of them, recognizes them in himself, and overcomes them. As long as a man does not recognize these forces in himself, he is just as much at their mercy as all unconscious forms of life which are directly in contact with all these creative forces and willy-nilly controlled by them. Only the human being who has attained the ability of self-recognition is able to rise in his consciousness above these forces. Instead of being at their mercy in an unconscious way, he is able to control them or transmit them in a transmuted and completely changed form. When a man is able to transmute the creative forces within himself, he is also able to transmute the forces operating within his own destiny, thus controlling his own fate. Now you understand why it's necessary and important to know about the 12-fold radiation of the powers of the four faces of God within yourself, and why it's essential to learn to control it. And when you realize that only your body and your material part of your being is built up out of these forces, whereas your divine self stands above them and is able to control them, you yourself can regain control over these tremendous creative powers, the same control you lost when you were born into the material world. Then yourself, which has been repressed and forced into your subconscious, is liberated, resurrected from the apparent death, and reinstated on its throne. This mystery of life is symbolized by the cross with the divine form crucified upon it, representing the second aspect of God. The creative principle clothes itself in matter and for eons of time makes the supreme sacrifice of taking upon itself the characteristics of the material world in order to animate it and fulfill its great task of spiritualizing matter by completely revealing the spirit in matter.